Listen to her lie. Listen, here she tells a goddamn lie accusing Henry Dundas of being a slave owner. He was an abolitionist. Take a look.
On the comparison to the renaming of Centennial Stadium, people have said, if you're going to rename Dundas, costly process because of a controversial figure like Dundas, why would you go about and name a stadium after someone with an equally controversial background? Is that not, speaking up both sides of your mouth?
Dundas delayed the cancellation and the abolition of slavery for many years. He also promoted taking children, young girls and boys, to take them away from their parents and bring them to England, to other parts of Europe as slaves so they could multiply, procreate, so there will be enough people, enough labor, slave labor, in order to service the plantations. Surely you're not comparing a slave owner. Well, and it's not, I don't know whether it's a slave owner or not.
Hang on, you don't know?
Well, but allow me to finish.
Hang on, you don't know. So you just called him a slave owner, because you're the expert here. You just called him a slave owner, and then you said, well, I don't know. You don't know? You said it, and then immediately you realized you were making things up, and then you immediately said, well, you don't know, but you said it anyways. And you're an expert, and you know what? And let's go to Joe Warmington's story, and then I want to go to the True North story about this, because they've got a great angle on it. So they've decided, let me come to the chase. I spent a lot of time talking about Henry Dundas, after whom Dundas Square is named, Young Dundas Square. They are going to change it to Sankofa Square. And I just keep thinking of, I knew a kid in my school, Neil Sankoff. I think, are they naming it after him? What did Neil do? Or is it after Sanka, the instant coffee? Toronto City Council approves Sankofa Square as a new name for Young Dundas Square and initiates plans to rename other city assets that include the name Dundas. You know why that was smart politics? Because first of all, the journalists are as stupid as the politicians in this town. So they're going to eat this stuff up. Second of all, do you think it's easier for Olivia Chow, who doesn't know what she's talking about? She just told a lie and immediately admitted that she lied. But do you think it's easier for her to cut taxes, cut the police? Taxes are high. The police are, there's this defund the police movement here as there is everywhere else. Traffic's atrocious. They're building subways that are years behind schedule, hundreds of millions over budget. Is it easier for her to actually do her job? Fix crime, fix taxes, fix waiting lists, the boring stuff of politics, garbage pickup. Is that easier? Or would she rather demonize some white guy 200 years ago as a slave owner, which is a damnable lie, and have a lot of discussion about that? And he can't fight back. And if you side with Henry Dundas, then you're a racist. Tell you one thing. 200 years from now, not a single human being will know anything about Olivia Chow, other than maybe a tiny footnote in the history of Toronto. Henry Dundas was such a great builder of this new country, in addition to his work abolishing slavery, that they named a whole city after him. Along with I was joking with Jennifer Dundas, the descendant of Henry Dundas, that frankly, renaming a subway stop is probably good, because the Toronto Transit Commission, the subway authority in Toronto, is so delayed, so crime-ridden, so dangerous. There's stabbings on the subway. There's wild youths running rampant on the subway. You probably don't want anyone you love and admire to have a subway station named after them in Toronto, because it's actually disreputable. But other than the subway station, which I think should be called Olivia Chow Station in honor of the crime, imagine that. And by the way, there's 4,500 businesses along Dundas Street, many of which have Dundas in their name, let alone in their addresses. Like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's cancel culture 2 centuries ago. And Sankofa Square. Hey, can you go to the? We'll skip over Joe Warmington's article. Let's go to True North, because our friends at True North, I think it was Andrew Lawton who did this. What does the word Sankofa mean? I think it's from a Ghana, a language in Ghana, Ghana. It's an African country. By the way, Ghana and Canada have very little in common. I just checked, and according to the the census, there are about 35,000 people in all of Canada who are from the country of Ghana. And I got no beef with Ghana. I'm sure they're nice people, but that's 0.1% of Canadians are from Ghana. And most of them have just arrived in the last generation, of course. So what's the connection? Why should the center of Toronto be named after something in Ghana that has nothing to do with Canada? Where did that come from? Did they Google it or something? Is that the depth of research? So here's an article by our friends over at True North. Toronto used word from slave trading African tribe to replace Dundas. Oh, this is just too much. Here, let's read through that together a little bit. Toronto City Council voted unanimously. Not a single person thought, no, we're not going to tear down our monuments and rename. Why don't they rename the whole city? Toronto City Council voted unanimously on Thursday to change the name of Toronto's world-famous Young Dundas Square to Sankofa Square. Do you think anyone's going to say that? If you rename Times Square, do you think people would if you called it Obama Square, you think anyone would call it that? To distance it from Henry Dundas's purported connection to the transatlantic slave trade. Connection, that's like saying Winston Churchill was connected to the German Luftwaffe. Connected to it, he fought against it. The word used by the city of Toronto, True North has learned, originated from a tribe known for its role in the slave trade. While Dundas was, in fact, an abolitionist, the Akan people of Ghana, from whom the word Sankofa comes, were active participants in the slave trade and imported slaves to develop their own economy. As scholar A. Norman Klein, reviewing the work of renowned Ghana historian Ivor Wilkes, wrote, the Akan, quote, exchanged their gold for these slaves who rewarded their Akan masters by creating an agricultural revolution during the 15th and 16th centuries. And then there's an excerpt from a scholarly paper by our friend Andrew Lawton. The Akan people imported slaves to help clear their forests, where they searched for gold, and also sold slaves to Europeans, fueling the transatlantic slave trade. In 2006, Ghana apologized to descendants of slaves for its role in the slave trade. This is what I said earlier. Slavery's been on every continent. And who do you think caught the slaves in Africa? It was often other African or Arab groups, and including the folks who came up with the word Sankofa. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow said the name change is part of the city's commitment to confronting anti-Black racism, advancing truth. Really? She just admitted that she actually said Henry Dundas had slaves. You heard her say it. Part of the city's reconciliation and justice and building a more inclusive and equitable city. How about fixing the streets? How about getting taxes down? How about cracking down on crime? The city of Toronto is committed to acknowledging the impact of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery while focusing on mitigating costs and impacts on residents and businesses. Chow said, adopting the name Sankofa Square recognizes the need to reflect on and reclaim teachings from the past and enable us to move forward together. What does that mean, to reclaim teachings from the past? I won't go on too much longer. Historians, even those on the political left, tend to agree that Dundas was a supporter of the abolition of slavery. Controversy around him stems from an amendment he proposed to an abolition motion from William Wilberforce to make it more gradual. But he said in doing so it was because he thought that was the most effective way to end slavery, given it took more than 50 years from that point for the transatlantic slave trade to end. He was likely right. Dundas also called on African leaders to stop their complicity in the slave trade, which they didn't do at the time. So is this one of the truths we're going to rediscover? The concept of Sankofa, that is, you know what? It feels like they just grabbed a word like Hakuna Matata. It feels like they grabbed an exotic word so Olivia Chow would practice saying it, and it would be the new Hakuna Matata. We're going to call it Hakuna Matata Square. You didn't check who invented the word Sankofa, that they were slave traders, so much so that they apologized. I met a black African country, Ghana. I didn't know this. I just read it together with you. A black African country apologizing for the slave trade is unusual, don't you think? You know, there's one more tweet I want to show, and I was just by chance. I was reading this and about the amount of slavery around the world. And when we think of slavery, we obviously think of the United States. And there's a reason for that, because they had slavery and they fought a civil war over it in part. And it was in English and it had a lot of connections. So, yeah, there's a good reason for us to think about American slavery. But American slavery was much less. I'm going to find, I'm just a moment ago, because I have a tweet here that you know, and I'm not finding it fast enough, and I don't want to do this in real time. All right, I'm going to give up. I was looking for the stats on slavery in different countries, including different empires at the time. I'm not saying that British slavery was better than French or Portuguese or Spanish slavery, although I think, frankly, the numbers were far, far fewer. And here it is. I found it. I'm going to send you a link. I'm going to put it in the live stream script. Just go here for a second. And I want to say that all slavery is bad, whether it was the Egyptian slavery of the Hebrews, the Israelites thousands of years ago, or modern slavery in China, which still exists. Yeah, pump this up as big as you can. So I saw this the other day, and I thought it was interesting. This is from Kenny Akers, who obviously is a black man, and he, you know, I would call him sort of a citizen scholar. I'm going to read a little bit of this to you, if I may. During the transatlantic slave trade, enslaved Africans were transported to various regions around the world. Here's a list of some of the major destinations and the estimated number of people that were transported to each. Brazil. Approximately 4.9 million enslaved people were transported to Brazil. Did you know that? That's, by the way, that's 10 times more than to the United States. 10 times more. Caribbean islands, including Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti. Around 5 million enslaved people were transported to the Caribbean. And some of those countries are now almost completely black. Then look at this next one. The worst people in the world, United States. An estimated 400,000 enslaved people were brought to the United States. Now, those are 400,000 tragedies. By the way, from those 400,000 black slaves, there are now 30 million descendants. American blacks are about 12% of the U.S. population. So, thank God they were not killed in the same way that many other slave regimes literally worked their slaves to death, which is just atrocious. I mean, any slavery is atrocious, but I think there are degrees. British North America, so Canada, approximately 12,000 enslaved people were transported to British North America. That was abolished earlier in Canada than I think almost anywhere in the world. And Henry Dundas was in part to credit for that. Spanish America, including Mexico and Colombia, 1.3 million. French Caribbean, including Guadeloupe and Martinique, 1.4 million. Those are tiny islands. Dutch Caribbean, 550,000. Portuguese, 3.9 million were enslaved and brought from Angola. Mozambique, 1.8 million. Indian Ocean Islands, including Mauritius and Reunion, 500,000. the total number of Africans transported during the transatlantic slave trade is estimated to be between 12.5 and 15 million people. And you can see the size of those arrows roughly shows the number of people. Most slaves, apparently, went to Central and South America and the Caribbean. Apparently, 12,000 went to British North America, where they were amongst the earliest who were freed. Now, of course, that's just the black African slave trade. Of course, there were slavers in Arabia, Muslim pirates, really, who would raid Europe and get white slaves, and over 1 million white slaves, including the entire town of Baltimore, Ireland. Baltimore is not just the name of a city in Maryland, it's the name of a city in Ireland. The entire town was captured and taken as slaves, white slaves, for Arabia. What I'm saying is a complicated history. And when Olivia Chow says we're trying to reclaim the teachings of the past, she is absolutely not. Because if she were, she would be aware that Ghana was a slave trading country. And there's really no connection between Ghana and Canada at all. And Ghana was so implicated in the slave trade that it actually issued an apology for slavery. And to condemn Henry Dundas as a slave keeper, which he was not, and to strip his name off something and put the name of a Ghanaian tribe that dealt with slaves is so atrocious, but how perfect for Olivia Chow. I'm spending a lot of time talking about that, I know. I just can't believe that it was unanimous. It was unanimous in City Council, but why not? What an easy way to seem virtue signaling. I hope that every single business and family that lives on Dundas Street, imagine telling 4,500 businesses, got to change your business card, got to change, Dundas Diner, Dundas this, you got to change. There's an entire city called Dundas, Ontario. How many people live in Dundas, Ontario? I don't know, it's probably a town, Dundas, Ontario. There's Dundas County, Ontario, and about 20,000 people there. Imagine telling them, are they going to tell every person in Dundas, Ontario, that they're going to change the name of the town? I'd like to see a poll on that. Frankly, I'd like to see a poll on that in Toronto, because there's no way that kind of bizarre cultural cancel. When they're trying to do to Dundas what they did to John A. Macdonald, they took him off the $10 bill and they put the statue of him in a coffin on Queen's Park. Just atrocious. Hey, I got to tell you, I'm going on a cruise with a whole bunch of rebels. We're sailing out of Fort Lauderdale on March 23rd, 2024. That's not so far away, less than 6 months away. A gorgeous trip around the Caribbean. Holland America Line, boy, is that luxurious. And we're going to bring some of our favorite rebel talent. Sheila Gunn Reid, David Menzies, and can you believe it? We're actually bringing Tamara Leach with us, and you are invited. That's rebelnewscruise.com.